Let's talk the Black Veterans Project. Such an important project. You were on a couple years ago, Richard. Kind of really, it was just getting off the ground. And you also have a veterans fundraiser. And the great thing with the Black Veterans Project is that you guys have submitted briefs to the Supreme Court in support of Black veterans to address discrimination. You guys are actually on the ground doing work. So for Richard, folks that don't know, tell them what the Black Veterans Project does.
Yeah, so the Black Veterans Project, we advance research, advocacy, and litigation to address like long-standing, historically based racial inequity and discrimination in the military and the veteran community. And so that work is incredibly complex. We work with stakeholders on Capitol Hill, congressional leaders on different types of legislation that will likely, now that Biden is president, will actually have some movement to it. That could really transform the landscape and the issue of race, not only in the military, but relative to veterans themselves, specifically veterans that have been locked out of their military benefits. And on the litigation side, we're actually collaborating with Yale Law School now, doing a bunch of FOIAs to look at disability rating disparities. And so when you get out of the military, say you injured your back, there is reason to believe that Black vets actually get less disability than their white counterparts, and certainly are kind of passed up for disability claims writ large. And that goes back, as far back as the military has been giving these sort of benefits. So we're really starting at the Vietnam era, and starting to look at all of the data that we can actually pull, which will likely take several years to kind of build out a white paper that explains this in a more nuanced fashion and presents solutions to these issues. I mean, and perhaps in some respect, perhaps might lead to litigation against the VA on behalf of a subset of Black vets that feel like they've been aggrieved and locked out of their benefits. And these benefits have long-term generational impact. So
This is really important work, and I always tell folks when it comes to Vietnam, a lot of folks don't know this, that in the beginning, they disproportionately drafted young Black and Latin men in the beginning. And really, the outrage only starts over Vietnam when little Johnny in the suburbs was being drafted and going to Vietnam and dying. So when it comes to veterans, there is always an intersection of race that I feel like a lot of folks ignore. Danielle, Richard kind of touched on it, but what are some of the specific issues that you see really affect Black veterans?
Yeah, well, I think we can't talk about sort of the issues of today and you sort of got at it there, without historical context. Here in the United States, military usually runs in families, right? So usually you had a parent, a grandparent who served in the military. And so I myself had a grandparent who served in the military. So when we see historically these people not being able to receive their benefits, World War II veterans not being able to access their GI Bill, we see that economically affect even current day Black veterans who are descendants of those veterans, and who go into service themselves now. And also part of what we're seeing is we are seeing that 19% of our listed force is Black, but there are very few Black officers and even fewer Black service members who are sort of at the top echelons of leadership and making the sort of real decisions in the military, alongside what Richard mentioned that's happening in the veteran landscape with an unequal access to benefits.
So no, listen, if y'all want more info, go to blackveteransproject.org, blackveteransproject.org, or follow on social media at Black Vet Project. These numbers might be kind of shaky, but one of the things that I've been hearing, y'all, is that the enrollment is getting lower for young Black folks going in the military, partly because of some of the issues that you're talking about, racism, discrimination, and feeling like when you get out, if you're a Black vet, you're not going to be treated the same kind of way. Danielle, can you speak to that? How a lot of younger people, from what I've seen, I know these numbers get kind of shaky, are falling back from enrolling because of fears how they're going to be treated in the military, predominantly white officers, predominantly white sergeants, and even when they leave.
Yeah, well, I think that this is sort of a dual-sided coin. I think in some areas, usually on both coasts and in urban areas, those numbers have never been really large. New York City, metropolitan areas like that, the number of young folks, and specifically young folks of color, Black and Latinx folks, has never been really large. A large swath of our of service members usually come from the South, and they come from the Midwest. And unfortunately, being a Midwesterner myself and a veteran, it's very rural, it's very poor. You don't have a lot of opportunities. So we are still seeing, I think, a good number of Black and Latinx young people, who are joining from the Midwest and from the South, just because of lack of opportunities, lack of health care, things like that. So I would say it's sort of a little more nuanced.
Gotcha. And Richard, talk about, I love the story, the reason why you decided to enroll.
In the military?
Yeah.
Well, it was multifaceted, right? I didn't grow up with a father. My white father abandoned me, but that's fine because I was raised by an incredible Haitian mom. I lost my scholarship. I was first generation college student at Morehouse, lost my scholarship and decided to intern for the Obama campaign. And of course, he ended up winning. And like for many, it was like a transcendent moment. And I was like, well, I can get school paid for and serve the first Black president. This can't be that bad. And so I joined up as a combat medic deployed to Afghanistan. And that's kind of what my trajectory was. I served for 7 years. Also in the New York State National Guard, I matriculated to graduate school.
Very nice. And really, what made you, for folks that don't know, what inspired you to do this, the Black Veterans Project, Richard?
It's multifaceted. I think one of the things is, about a year after I got out of the military, I fell into a deep, deep, deep depression. I think that happens to many military vets that lose their sense of identity and purpose as they transition and kind of come back into a civilian landscape that, especially now when there's so few who serve, that don't really understand their experiences and oftentimes pathologize vets from the outset, and don't necessarily provide community and support for vets that are transitioning back in. And so because of that, I went into a spiral for a good year and a half. And if it wasn't for my mother moving to New York, getting us a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, I would have ended up homeless. But during that time, I started to read a lot. That's kind of how I found solace. And I came across an event with a room filled with Black vets. Most of them were formerly incarcerated or homeless. And it piqued my curiosity. And I already knew that racial injustice was an issue. And so I just started to do a lot of research, and birthed out of that was this understanding that I could be of utility in this space. And there weren't really Black veteran organizations that really understood how to use the internet well, how to organize our generation of Black vet, how to work really substantively on the Hill because I have lobbying experience and public policy background. And so I knew I could bring a lot of those skills to bear. And that's what I've done.
Really, really important work. Again, you guys are submitting briefs to the Supreme Court. You're doing on the ground work. Really, really important. BlackVeteransProject.org. Speaking of military, let's talk about, before y'all go, patriotism. Because when folks think about a patriot, they have a certain image of a patriot. And I like to really break down those images in people's minds of what a patriot really looks like. And a lot of folks to understand, for a lot of Black folks, we have an interesting relationship with patriotism, right? We love our country, but we have some issues with our country. You know what I'm saying? It's very complicated. Danielle, speak to that term of patriotism and why it's important to have the Black Veterans Project, it really breaks down the image of what a quote unquote patriot is.
Yeah, I mean, something that I've sort of always said is I can find no greater patriot than Black Americans. Through all of the various conditions in which we have been marginalized and continue to, and in various ways, whether it's through serving in public office or running for public office, whether it's through serving in the military, we have served our country through some pretty horrifying times. And so for me, I think it's important that the image that we see in our heads is not, a white male sort of in uniform. I think that obviously since Vietnam, the pendulum has sort of swung the other way, where we are a lot more, supportive, I believe, of the military. But I still think in our minds, and the image that we get is usually of someone who's white and usually someone who's male. So I want us to begin to one, think about other ways that we can serve our country and our nation, not just through the military, and also to understand that there are those who have been marginalized and continue to serve in uniform today, whether that's LGBTQ, Black folks, certainly women of color. So I think that the Black Veterans Project has a unique intersection of all of those, where we can sort of highlight it and sort of, I'm hoping, change the ways in which we think of what patriotism is and who is a patriot.
Well said. Richard, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about the maintenance of our democracy, I look at the military as the most consequential institution between democratic governance and complete tyranny, and we're kind of facing that now. So I think it's incredibly important that Black people are represented in that institution, and the degree to which we are going to shift ways in which the military is propagated for all these different kind of corporate nefarious ends. We have to be part of that institution. We have to be able to have diversity, equity, and inclusion in that institution, be able to hold it accountable. But also, the military serves at the leisure of the people, right? Like the people have to be invested in a conversation about what the military looks like, the kinds of expenditures. I mean, it takes up such a large part of our domestic budget. So we have to be more interested. I mean, we're having the same conversation about defund the police. There should be requisite conversations about defunding the military to the degree to which it's kind of become a colonial force. And so I believe Black people should continue to serve, certainly until there's universal health care, housing, and education, and that is that opportunity to receive those benefits. But I want Black people to be able to feel like they can hold on to their sense of self and their sense of autonomy while moving through this institution. And that's not always true. And certainly in high numbers. And just to kind of like round this out, I think one thing that people should understand is that a growing number of people who serve are actually military contractors, right? And so an increasing number of Black people who serve aren't actually afforded any kind of the protections that the military provides, and certainly no access to the benefits that would come if they had served, right? Like, disability compensation, education, housing, et cetera, et cetera. There are about 8 Black veterans that have been arrested on trumped up drug charges, sitting in Kuwaiti prisons, being tortured every day. And it's been happening for years. No one's talking about it, right? They've been abandoned by their government. And so when the military talks about things like, we leave no soldier behind, these men who decided to join up, perhaps as military contractors, but nonetheless, they went under the auspices and leadership of the Department of Defense, have been abandoned. And we can't erase their contributions either. And certainly as the military continues to evolve, these conversations become even more complex.